بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So inshallah today we will be continuing our series on the perfecting the Quranic recitation. So yesterday we just had some introductory topics about how many the types of mistakes. We also talked about how much tajweed does a person actually have to learn in their life and what's necessary for them. And then we talked about a few links that we can use to practically help us along and why we're doing this course. Inshallah, today's topics. The first topic is that we're going to talk about how fast should we actually recite. Is there a speed limit to the fasting, to the reciting? Number two is difference between. Then we're going to get into the letters. Alhamdulillah, we're going to talk about the difference between alif and hamza, but we're primarily going to talk about alif because we're going in order of the Arabic alphabet. And then we're going to talk about how to actually pronounce an alif and one common error that does happen sometimes regarding an alif. So let's start, inshallah. So the first question is, how fast should we recite? Normally, if someone takes a class of Tajweed, they're going to make this a bit more. The goal here is to make it very simple and straightforward. If you take a class on Tajweed, they're going to tell you that there's 3 different speeds of Tajweed. One's called Tahqiq, which is very slow. The second one is called Tadweer, which is middle. Then there's one called Hadar, which is a bit fast. And then the Qurra do a 4th speed called Mujawwad, which is very slow. So we're gonna leave that out because that's just let's make this very simple for everyone. Rule of thumb is that however fast you want to recite, you can recite as long as 2 things can be maintained. If you can do these next 2 things, you can recite as fast as you want. Because the Qur'an actually did not have a limit on the actual speed of it. There was a general situation. Number 1, each letter is read clearly. And the books of Tajweed specifically mention that each letter is read clearly, lis-sami', for the one hearing you, not for you. It has to be clear for the one that is hearing you, not you yourself. And number 2, major and minor mistakes. You're reading at a speed where major and minor mistakes can be avoided. If someone starts reading so fast where they have to skip muds or they have to skip gunnas, you're going too fast. If someone is going so fast where certain letters are not being pronounced correctly, that means you're going too fast. So a simple rule to know whether you're going too fast or not is if the letters aren't coming out clearly or you're not able to keep track of the major and minor mistakes. And we discussed those types of mistakes yesterday. So as long as these 2 can be held together, you can go as fast as you want. There's scholars in the past that would finish the entire Quran within a few hours. That barakah in their time. But nevertheless, they did read at a faster pace. Here are some common neglected aspects when it comes to reading slow or fast. Number 1, some things that people leave out when they're trying to read fast is, number 1 is ghunna. A lot of people, when they try to read fast, they end up leaving out all the ghunnas. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر. They end up going قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله. They're skipping all of the ghunnas. So that should not be done. Another thing that happens when people try to go too fast, they skip all the stretches. والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك. It's بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين إذا جاء نصر الله. So they end up skipping stretches if they go too fast. So that's another sign that you're going too fast. Another thing is that you should avoid jumbling letters together. If you're going at a speed where for the people who are hearing you, they feel like you're putting letters together. For example, if someone is reading Surah Kawthar, Inna A'tayna Kal Kawthar, but they start reading so fast where Inna A'tayna Kawthar, it sounded like you said Inna A'tayna Thawar or something like that, where you mash them all together. So that also happens if someone is going too fast. So in general, every red letter should be read clearly and major and minor mistakes should be avoided. If those 2 things are happening, then your speed is fine, regardless of how slow or fast you're going. So now, inshallah, we'll begin talking about the actual letters one by one. But before we do that, just a few things to keep in mind. Number 1, we're just discussing this entire whole Ramadan thing is going to be about just the basics of pronouncing each letter. That's what we're going to be doing. We won't go into other advanced topics, things about mukharij and sifat and sifat lazima, all those topics. We won't be covering any of those things. Number of things, common errors will be discussed, that there are some common errors that people make when pronouncing certain letters. And lastly, letter pronunciations do overlap. Sometimes you'll have multiple letters that all come from the exact same place and are pronounced pretty much almost exactly the same. For example, like meme and ba. Meme and ba are both pronounced from the lips. The difference between the two is that one's from the dry part and the other one's from the wet part of the lips. But nevertheless, they're pretty close. Or all the letters furra min libin, fa, ra, meme, lam, ba, they're all very similar in where they're recited from. But anyway, so there will be some overlap, but that's okay. That means we'll keep having revision about the same concept over and over and over again. So now let's start with the letter Alif, inshallah. So the first thing is Alif is not a Hamza. Um, I myself am from the Indian subcontinent, from Pakistan. So as we grew up, we understood Alif to be a Hamza. I'll give you examples of what's not. So the only reason I'm mentioning this is in the next few slides, when I start talking about the pronunciation of an Alif, I do not want anyone to think I'm talking about a Hamza. I'm talking about an Alif. So in the Arabic language, not in Urdu, in the Arabic language, Alif only refers to a stretching or a mud sound when a fatha or a zabar is stretched. In simple words, that sound of that sound that you hear, the long vowel that is the only thing that's called an alif in the Arabic language. There is no such thing as an alif, at least when it comes to the Arabic. Yes, there's some technicalities for grammar, but we'll leave that. So everything else will be considered a Hamza. But just to make it very clear, I want everyone to pay attention to the chart at the bottom. First, let's look at examples of Alif. So if you look on the left, you will see examples of Alif. The first one, Qala. Qala, that's it. It's the sound. Qala. As-salata. Salah, that sound. Salata. Again, the sound is the alif. Samawa. So that sound coming again. Samawa. So you're stretching a fatha. You're stretching a fatha. Samawati. So that is the alif. Was-sama'i wa tariq, or whatever other surah we want to think of. So that sound again is alif. So these are all considered to be alif. So whenever you have a stretching sound on a fatha, that's the only thing called an alif in Arabic. What is not an alif? Amintum. Amintum. Now we'll be thinking that, wait, isn't there an alif right at the beginning? No. The Arabs considered that a Hamza. That's why on the left side, sorry, amintum, not amintum, amintum. That's why on the left side right over here, I wrote it out how it's, if you actually read an Arabic book, it will be written out like this. They'll put a Hamza on top of it to let you know it's a Hamza. So in amintum, this is not an alif because it has a fatha and you're not stretching it. Next example is sawa'un, the at the ending. The at the ending, that's obviously a Hamza. Wa'idh akhadha. Wa'idh, so here there's an E and a sound. E-a. The fatha is not being stretched, you're just making an E and a sound. Those are also Hamzas, not alifs. Fa'tu, fa'tu. So here, this letter here, it's a Hamza that's sakin. Yu'minuna. So these are all considered Hamza. So only the stretching sound is called an alif. Everything else is considered to be a Hamza in the Arabic language. So when I'm talking about Hamza alif in the next slide, I'm only talking about the sound. Let's move forward, inshallah. So how is an alif pronounced? This will get a bit technical, but let's keep it as simple as possible. So in our mouths, there is a hollow or empty part down from the throat all the way to the mouth. So when you are breathing or saying anything, there's that emptiness in your entire mouth and throat where the air is coming out from. So that empty part where all the air and sound is coming out from, in Arabic, that's called the jawf. Jawf literally means a cavity, an open area. That's what a jawf is called. Alif is pronounced by letting out the sound from the jawf, from the emptiness of the mouth, that area that's empty where there's nothing there. When it comes from the throat all the way out from the mouth, that's where the alif is going to come from. And while the alif is being pronounced, the tongue should not be doing anything. It should remain at rest. So if we can see the picture on the side, so on the right side, you see that yellow area. It's just a way to signify the emptiness of the throat. And that blue area, it could be larger. Right? This is a random picture. But that whole area in the mouth is actually much larger than just this blue part. That whole area where the air and the sound is coming from, that's the jawf. So when you just say alif, ah, so the tongue is not moving, not going up or down. There are some technicalities if you make it heavy, like all, but I'm not going to discuss that right now. That will go into sifat. So just simple. No tongue movement, no nothing. Just let the sound straight out of the mouth. So that's in a very simple, in a nutshell, how you pronounce an alif. It can't be as more simpler than this. One common error that I wanted to mention before we end off, inshallah, that the alif sound should end with the sound simply flowing out. Imam Ibn al-Jazri, rahmatullah alayh, who I was mentioning yesterday, was one of the imams of Tajweed. He says about alif, which is actually a letter of mud, he said that وَهِيَ حُرُوفُ مَدٍّ لِلْهَوَاءِ تَنْتَهِي. That when you say them, they should end with just air coming out of your mouth. What does that mean? No other part of the mouth should block the sound from coming out. When you're pronouncing an alif, or qala, like but nothing should be blocking it. So that means tongue, lips, and throat should not interfere with the sound coming out. Now there is one, for example, here's an example here. This is an end of an ayah. It should be khabiran basira. Basira, ra, ra. There's no stoppage. Ra, it's just flowing out. Ra. But one mistake, a very common mistake that happens is some people when they end an ayah like this, they say khabiran basira, basira, ra. So that is a mistake because an alif means the sound should come out and flow out without anything stopping it. So khabiran basira, basira. If someone says basira, ra, that means your throat is partially blocking the sound. You're actually creating a hamza at the end instead. So these were some just basic things about the alif, and then inshallah from tomorrow we will move on to ba. One point I want to make again, that there's a lot of detail we can discuss, like heavy alif and light alif, but right now we're just focusing on the letter itself. Those are other details. Maybe inshallah post Ramadan we'll do some other program. Right now we're just going to go to the basics of the letters. So that is it for today. So subhanakallah wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi